All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Santa Cruz County 1st District Supervisor 2024 Candidate Forum. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get started here. First off, we're going to have Clay Kemp, the Executive Director of the Seniors Council, say just a few words, and then he'll introduce John Balutz, who is going to be our facilitator today, and the two candidates, Lanny Faulkner and Manu Koenig. So thank you again for joining us. Clay, take it away.
I just want to echo what Zach just said. Thanks for all the attendees, and of course to Manu and Lonnie for participating in this. It's much appreciated. Our forum is going to focus on issues affecting older adults and people with disabilities in our community. And our format will be that each candidate gets to make an opening statement of a couple minutes. Then we will ask a series of questions. And again, each candidate will have 2 minutes to reply to that. At the end, we will close with a minute wrap up from each candidate. Folks are welcome to send questions in the question box. We will take those after the scripted questions that we have. And just for everybody's information, the questions that are lined up are taken from audience questions in previous forums and input from experts in the field of aging. So with that, I think I will just turn it over to John Balutz, who's our moderator for today. I do want to say thanks to Zach and Britt and Patty for all their work planning this meeting and again getting the candidates here. So thanks to each of you. And then John's our moderator. John is the Executive Director of Health Project Center, providing a variety of services along the Central Coast and especially in Santa Cruz County. So John, it's all yours.
Hello, and it's an honor and a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Clay. And I do look forward to a great conversation today. All right, so we will start with Supervisor Koenig, and then we'll go back. We'll kind of give you each a chance to answer each question first, and I'll just alternate. So question number one, Santa Cruz County's age 65 to 84 population grew at a 90% rate over the last decade, which is faster than any other county in all of California. How do you foresee meeting the needs of these older adults?
Well, I look forward to answering that question. First of all, I'm not sure if you want me to make an opening statement, and also I'm unable to start my video at the moment, if you wanted us to participate that way.
Very good. Please go ahead with an opening statement. And Zach, there you go. Thank you, Zach.
Great. Well, pleasure to be here. My name is Manu Koenig. I am the current 1st District Supervisor here in Santa Cruz County, and I was born and raised here in Santa Cruz. And a big reason why I continue to live here is because of the older adults in my life. My grandparents are here. They live over near the 26th Avenue area, and my parents are out in rural Corralitos. So that it's a very meaningful part of my life is supporting older adults. Some of the things that I've done in my time as a supervisor are actually, I'm just coming from a Metro meeting, and we've done a lot to expand Metro because we know that it's just a vital part for everyone to get around, and especially seniors who depend on public transportation. And of course, Cruz as well. We're expanding Cruz service at the same time that we expand Metro, the sort of traditional bulk service. And so hopefully really going to be increasing mobility for older adults in our community through those actions. I've also been a stalwart defender of mobile home parks because they house so many seniors in our community and really provide that diverse housing stock that's necessary. So I've strengthened the mobile home rent stabilization ordinance on a number of occasions, ensuring that mobile homes, that the stable rent is inheritable for kids, the next generation, or maybe it's a caregiver that's currently living with an older adult. And have created a new arbitration process so that if a park owner comes in with a special rent adjustment, that there's a good low-cost way without going directly to the courts to try to determine if that's fair. And I've also stepped in and worked directly with mobile home park residents on a number of occasions, whether it's, in one case, they were seeing a huge rent increase because the property was transferred and the property assessment was going up. And also just to make sure that their landlord is actually maintaining the property. I've also been a stalwart supporter of the Live Oak Senior Center and written in a number of letters to the school district to try to resolve issues with that lease there.
Well, thank you. And I will repeat the other question. We'll come back to that for next. I skipped the introductions and sorry about that. Lottie Faulkner, you can go ahead and make your opening statement. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much for the honor to be here. A little about me. I'm a scientist, a mom, wilderness first responder, and I'm a founder of the organization Equity Transit, which in part started around the importance of providing equitable transportation, especially to our seniors and people with disabilities. I have a master's in human physiology, and I've lived in the county for 27 years and in the Live Oak area for 16. I've worked on environmental education. I've worked nationally and internationally in the medical field, collaborating across agencies and functions, bringing people together to work on multi-million-dollar projects, roles that I say are very similar or parallel to that of county supervisor. I spent the last several years serving as a stakeholder with a number of local agencies, such as the Office of Response, Recovery, and Resilience on Disaster Preparedness, the Community Traffic Safety Coalition, providing safer streets, especially for our most vulnerable who would like to walk safely in our community, walk and roll. I founded, like I said, Equity Transit and worked with the Metro program, Reimagine Metro, to help build the 15-minute bus service and accessibility on major transit corridors. I worked on the housing element and have also supported rent stabilization for our mobile home parks and have a lot of senior supporters from our mobile home parks. I've served as a Democratic state delegate, which has given me time to grow relationships with our state legislators. And I've been asked to run by our senior leaders in our community who were really shocked when one of the first things the incumbent did in 2021 was to fire 2 of our senior women from a volunteer commission to replace them with 2 male friends, rather than allowing them to finish their term. I've been asked to run and endorsed by school board members, Live Oak, Soquel, teachers, seniors, union members, and I'm just going to skip forward. I've been endorsed by 24 major organizations, 11 major unions, small business owners, and former Supervisor John Leopold, Senator Bill Monning, Sam Farr, Mark Stone, and Mayor Fred Keeley. I hope to have the honor of your vote. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. And I will repeat the question again. And then as we're going to take turns going first, then Ms. Faulkner, then you'll answer this question and we'll go from there. Santa Cruz County's age 55 to 84 population grew at a 90% rate over the last decade, which is faster than any other county in all of California. How do you foresee meeting the needs of these older adults?
Well, I think it's really, really important that we start to focus on how we can build advocating and strengthening programs and collaborations throughout our county. And I know that we have the senior council, and I know there's a lot of work being done, and I would like to further investigate how we can bring other organizations and people into that fold. So bringing more awareness to the community as a whole is really critical so that people can get involved wherever we can get people involved. Ensuring that we're investing more money, more equitable funds in that regards. I noticed that the Ombudsman program was eliminated, and I think that this is a real critical program for this community. And so really looking closely at how we can better invest and increase our funding for these programs is going to be critical because of this growing nature of our demographic here. The equitable access to transportation is critical in dealing with getting people out of being isolated. And so the fact that we're working on metro access is really critical, as well as the future of rail, bringing more access to people who, as they get older, may not be able to drive or may not want to drive and not feel safe to drive. So putting that effort in as well. Providing a safety net, as a lot of our elder community members are at risk for falling into homelessness. And so really looking at how we can provide a safety net, preventing our seniors from falling into homelessness ahead of time. Helping to provide financial guidance to our seniors and older adults as they're starting to look towards retirement, so that we can actually help people preventing the problems ahead of time. A lot of us are just working so hard trying to get ahead, but let's look ahead and try to create some preventiveness. Thank you. I see the time's up.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's critical that we expand housing. Of course, a lot of seniors want to stay in their housing, and that's important because you've lived your whole life in one place, and when you're aging, it's not a great time to move. But we need to expand housing to make sure that the rest of their families and support networks can live here as well. One of the most common concerns I hear from everyone, but particularly from seniors, is that it takes 6 months sometimes to see a needed specialist in one of our healthcare facilities. And that's because it's extremely expensive for doctors even to live here. I mean, the cost of living is just so out of control. So that's why I've done a lot throughout my first term to focus on housing expansion. We've just overhauled our general plan here in the county, just passed a housing element. We expect it'll be approved by the state in the coming days or weeks. And that really sets the table for housing expansion, particularly along some of our transit corridors, so that we can build housing for the next generation of doctors, of nurses, make sure that our seniors' needs are being met, and also that their families can afford to live close by as well. I mean, of course, we're expanding assisted living and memory care facilities too. At the same time, we have not enough of those in our community. But I think just housing overall is probably the more critical piece of that. And then our access to medical care in general is extremely important. So, when Kaiser was talking about coming in and opening a new facility here, I really made sure that we are holding them accountable, getting as much out of many community contributions from them as possible, and as they were considering expanding their footprint, and that also we measure how much an entity like Kaiser is actually giving back to our community compared to what folks like Dignity and Sutter and Watsonville Hospital are seeing. Because the reality is that half of our community is on some kind of government insurance, like Medicare or Medi-Cal. And so we have to make sure that our existing health providers can continue to provide that level of care.
Super, thank you. All right, I'll go back at you with another question here. What ideas do you have to avoid or at least mitigate the current plans to demolish the longstanding Live Oak Senior Center and replace it with school employee housing?
Yeah, so I've intervened a couple of times here to talk to the school district about ensuring that if anything is built there other than the current senior center, that it's a collaborative project. And then even in the short term, just to try to negotiate lease terms that work for both parties. So, I think when this came up over a year ago in like winter, fall of 2022, the school district was saying, oh, well, we don't want to invest any more money into a building that ultimately is not going to be serving students. Right? Talked to some of the folks I know who work in real estate and came back and said, well, look, clearly all you need to do is write into the lease terms that the tenant will pay for the improvements. And of course, in return, they should get a longer lease term so that they can ultimately reap the benefits of those investments. When the school district came back again a year later, saying, again, trying to evict the senior services there, I wrote a letter that said very clearly, and would be happy to share this, saying, you guys, you have to work collaboratively. The whole reason the school district owns this building in the first place is because they promised that senior services would have a permanent home here in our community. And if you ever hope to do something like pass another bond in order to support the construction of more senior housing, well, you sure as heck better have that aging voter base on your side in order to actually do that. And we can't, this cannot pit seniors versus students. This has to be seniors and students. I think that there's a lot of great programs ultimately that could be run out of the senior center, whether it's the current iteration or a future one that supports both populations. And really, as a result of that work, I was recently awarded the Community Champion Award by Community Bridges and Meals on Wheels. And really honored by that recognition.
Thank you. Ms. Faulkner.
Thank you so much. You know, I really see this property as such an opportunity for, you know, the word collaboration is really key here. And if it's done well, and if you have really good leadership underneath this to look at possible out of the box solutions as much as we can to, you know, here's an opportunity to have a senior center, perhaps a future with living spaces above it, and just bulldozing the Live Oak Senior Center. I would say that that really doesn't give homage to the fact that you know, the original Baskin, Elena Baskin, who actually provided this great opportunity and this great resource to our senior community, and the partnership that had gone on for a number of years between the school district and the senior center was beneficial to both. And so I think bringing people together to create really needs that kind of leadership to bring people together to create that partnership that then we can create solutions together rather than a win-lose, that it's really a win-win for everybody. Whether that is that they sell the property or that there's a combined effort together to create and co-use that property. Collaborating also with organizations locally, like our churches and community members, to help invest in, bring them into the fold, bring other people in the community into that conversation to help be a part of this great resource for our seniors. So many of us will be seniors in the future, and so we're going to need to grow these resources. And I really see this as a great opportunity for a very vibrant program and location in the heart of Live Oak. Look at also, again, being creatively. I know that there's limitations that the school themselves have because it's owned by the school property. And how can we work around some of these limitations and work creatively together? And look at the master plan for aging and look at some of the ways that we might be able to get grants and more funding that can help address some of the challenges here. Thank you.
Thank you. And I've got another question for you right here. 9 out of 15 senior services program in the county had their funding eliminated completely in the most recent county core community program funding process. This is despite seniors growing faster than any other age group in Santa Cruz County. Adjusted for inflation, county funding for senior programs was reduced by more than $430,000 since 2017. What, if anything, would you do to address that?
Yeah, you know, one of the things I have to say is I don't understand how some of these programs got cut and how they were prioritized. But I certainly see that, for example, the Ombudsman program and many other programs that have been cut are so essential to our senior community. And so I would say that it's really important that we continue to grow our investment, grow our prioritization, and start to access again our state legislators and money that might be coming available. I know the state of California and their California's master plan for aging is really going to put a lot of focus and energy into that. And I have to say personally, I really have to start to dig into these documents and these legislations and things that are coming up. It's an area that I really support the senior services, but to understand the fine lines and the aspects that are going to come available, need to spend more time in regards to that. But as we do, how we could get more money and more access, and then community investment. I really believe in getting the community, growing community connectedness, growing connectedness across the ages will really help people understand why these programs are so important and why we need to prioritize them, so that we have buy-in from everybody in the community and support from everyone in the community. We know that money's really tight. So I talk a lot with, for example, at the union level, that we actually have a systemic problem that we look at not just locally, but statewide as well as nationally. We have a lot of systemic issues that are based in the uneven distribution of wealth. And so even though I cannot necessarily directly impact that, we have to all start to work together and think of how we can change these systemic issues. Otherwise, nothing's going to change locally. It's just going to be throwing Band-Aids on really big issues. Thank you.
Thanks.
No, I'll be the first to admit that when I look back at my last 3 years and change as supervisor, one of the things that jumps out to me that could have been better is the core process. And I've even said as much recently in a debate with the Democratic Central Committee. I think that, I mean, certainly there was an awareness of maintaining services for seniors. That's one of the first programs that we set aside and said, we're not even going to consider this as part of a competitive program because we know we want to fund it, is Meals on Wheels. But we could have done more. And I think going forward into this next cycle of core, that we need to do a few things. The first is really make sure that we define what social safety net we want to have at the outset, so that it's clear that these are the services that we can commit to providing, and that we are also going to be able to commit to funding year over year. So there's not these huge fluctuations in program budget that then ultimately threaten them. We also need to ask ourselves, is anyone going to die if we take away these services? I mean, in a lot of cases, our seniors especially could face very, life-threatening situation without the ability to connect with these various services. And then what programs have state or federal matching dollars available that we can pull down by providing, $1 of local money, where we can then pull down 5 federal dollars in exchange. So I think we should absolutely be prioritizing those kinds of programs. So those are the things I'm going to make sure are considered as part of the core process going forward. I do also think that there are opportunities for programs that fund both youth and seniors. Really, I mean, that was such as foster grandparent, right? A great program that brings youth and seniors together and ultimately benefits both. So those are the kind of win-wins I'll look for as well.
Thank you. Got another question for you. Equity is an important topic today, but there's very little local discussion that addresses or even acknowledges the problem of ageism and ableism. What would you do to dismantle ageism in Santa Cruz County?
I think ultimately creating more opportunities for people of all ages to both live and work together in community. I think one big thing we can do is, right now, probably a lot of that ageism, a lot of the tension is coming from the housing situation, right? The challenge for younger generations to find housing, some sense of resentment maybe against the people who are already here or who have stopped housing production. I think maybe one big solution there is to help seniors who are currently in their homes, to have a roommate, right? Someone who can help address the issue of loneliness, but also then have that cross-generational connection, and then ultimately that permeates more into the community as they share friends and go to events together, etc. We've talked about sort of a number of the other things we can do to just host sort of cross-generational events. And we could certainly look at working with specific organizations, or working with the Community Foundation to bring in a number of organizations around specific events that help to bridge generational divides. Where, for example, my friend's writing a book called How to Interview Your Parents. Maybe he can write a subchapter in there about how to interview your grandparents. But this would be kind of a great opportunity to then take that maybe as a template and have people do that throughout the community. And maybe we could work on some art projects too that then ultimately share the results of a program like that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Equity is a hugely important issue, and it's one of the reasons why I founded the organization Equity Transit, based on a lot of conversations that I had with my friends who are seniors and folks on the Elderly and Disabled Transportation Commission, some of whom have endorsed my campaign. I think it really starts at a foundation of growing connections between our young people and our older adults, all the way across these generations. In order to do that, creating programs that build trust and work to grow a community where we're connected across the ages. Senior Center would be a wonderful place to host cooking, where older adults can help young people learn how to cook out in the gardens. We have an absolutely fantastic Life Lab program and getting seniors and kids out together in the gardens. And, you know, I have my own history growing up in a multi-generational family where, you know, my aunties and grandparents in their 70s and 80s were teaching us all these kinds of fun things as young people. And having young people grow up trusting and having those relationships with older people really is key to growing that awareness in the community. Then, in a way, we grow up saying, I want to take care of my aunties as they get older. For example, I have a friend named Yoli, and she's really done that. She's 81 years old. She gets in the garden. She gets together with the mamas who are in their 30s, young moms who need a lot of support with their new babies and kids. And all of them, all these across generations get together and they feel really supported. And the kids learn to love their elders and respect and have a lot of joy together, sharing time and food. As well, I think just growing programs and again, having, sorry, my time is up, but I just want to say programs like Equity Transit that help to bring those types of programs to the community as well. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, coming to the next question here. Are you supporting or opposing Measure K on our local ballots, and why or why not?
I am supporting and I've actually endorsed Measure K. First of all, if it had taxed really things like food and essential items, medicines and those types of things, then I would not have supported it. But because those things are not included in being taxed for Measure K, we will be able to generate about $10 million estimated. And a lot of that money will come from people who come to visit from out of town. And that tax, that half-a-cent sales tax, will really help to generate money that then we can apply towards things like the mental health issue. We really have a mental health crisis that impacts all age levels from very young to our seniors. Seniors are really struggling, of course, with isolation, and they really need support around mental health issues. It will also help to support roads. We can help allocate a significant portion to help with our road issues. And that helps because we actually have a lot of seniors in our mountain areas, and them feeling safe, whether they're in a car or being driven on the roads, is really critical. And there's a lot of issues with the roads up in the mountains and here locally, as well as to help with some issues around disaster preparedness. We know we are a higher fire risk area, as well as flooding. So we kind of get hit by landslides and all these different things. And I think the Measure K will be really critical to help us have a steady flow of income that will address some of these key issues for the county.
Thank you.
I have not taken a public position on Measure K. I think that, you know, obviously the county needs more revenue. We're really facing a financial crunch after responding to 7 federally declared disasters in the last 6 years. And so, yes, things are challenging. But at the same time, on the other hand, you know, putting an additional tax burden on the community when right now one of the top concerns I'm hearing is cost of living increases, you know, I can understand how people just can't support that. And you know, it's certainly, yes, some will be paid by people visiting our community, but when you look at the top sales tax generators for the county, it's actually really the businesses in the middle part of the county, upper 41st in particular, and then kind of get some gas stations largely throughout the community. So, for example, Home Depot, where plenty of people go to get their gardening supplies or, you know, hummingbird food, et cetera. That's one of the top sales tax generators, and that's definitely some place that people are going to feel the impact of increased prices. Pet Pals is another major sales tax generator, and of course, I think it's vital that people, especially older adults, have pets to keep them active and have a companion. So that's another place that people would feel the pinch. You know, ultimately, I think if we're going to address this, you know, $10 million increase would certainly make things a little bit better for a short amount of time. But we have some real systemic issues that we have to address here as well. My concern would be that if we put the Band-Aid on, then we don't deal with some of the larger issues that we're facing as a community.
Great. And for the next question here, speaking of larger issues, what are your solutions to address the specific housing needs of older adults and people with disabilities? What will you do to get older adults and people with disabilities included in Santa Cruz housing plans and plans for those who are caring for those who are unhoused?
Yeah, so I've talked a little bit about this already. I think to go further, one of the beneficial things about building housing for seniors is that we can actually we can restrict housing to 55 plus population, right? It's legal, whereas you can't discriminate for a lot of other things, but we actually can say this is specifically for seniors. So I think that we should look at incentives to building senior housing, whether that is a ministerial approval process in our planning department or reduced permitting fees for those kinds of projects. And so that would be for, of course, larger multifamily housing. I already talked about ways we can create more housing in general for the workforce that then also supports our senior community. I think we can also look at, as we implement conduization of ADUs, the ability to own an ADU separately, we can start to look at how we can connect people who are interested in helping to build or buy an ADU and connect with a senior who maybe has a larger single family lot that could both use the additional income and use the potential companionship of having someone live on their property with them or share their property. Yeah, those are the main ideas that come to mind. I mean, we could also look at things like permit fee reductions for seniors who are looking to expand their home, or specifically at core programs that we fund that help to connect seniors with folks who are looking to rent a room.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was at the farmer's market and I had a table there, I had a lot of seniors come and talk to me about their personal experiences, and some folks who are living in mobile home parks. For example, one mobile home park I looked at, the average price was $500,000 for an average mobile home, which means you have to come up with $100,000 down and $11,000 a month to afford that. And that's not really affordable for a lot of folks on fixed incomes. So we really have to talk about what is affordable and look at not just building lots of market rate, but really hone in on how we can build low and very low income housing, make it more accessible to our seniors, ensuring a higher number of these homes are built with ADA compliant access, and just really focus in on honing and on this need for how we can build more homes for our seniors and folks on fixed income, people with disabilities that may be also requiring also be on fixed income. Also providing that safety net, right? So there's people that are at risk of losing their housing, and if we can provide an account or some way to help manage those at risk and help support those at risk so we can keep them in their home, it ends up being more costly to us to actually have to manage the situation after people become homeless. So let's address it ahead of schedule, and providing financial counseling and support. And again, looking ahead, right? So we've got a whole generation that's going to be entering into retirement and being faced with living on a fixed income. So let's start to look ahead and look prophylactically so we can help address those people, providing them with counseling and support so that as they enter retirement, they can be fully prepared for how they can best manage it and how we can best support them. I'm also a big fan of multi-generational and multi-family housing, and looking at that as a conversation as well for some solutions. Thank you.
Okay. The next question, loneliness and isolation have been critical issues facing older adults for the past decade. COVID took this issue from being a problem to a crisis. How will we re-engage our seniors and people with disabilities in the coming 5 years?
Thank you. So I imagine that a lot of our seniors who are still remaining isolated after COVID, who may have been going out before COVID, are really combating, looking at fears, right? So having the fear to go out now that things have been opening up for a long time, and they might still have a lot of fear around being in the social environment. So creating opportunities for them to, let's say, come and be masked in larger areas that are more, let's say, have filtration and open windows, getting folks out so they can start to feel more comfortable in that social environment. Now, the other thing is, a lot of people don't necessarily have easy access to transportation, or they may not be able to drive. And that's a key thing. Access to good, robust public transportation is really critical. And so helping to provide more bus service, that 15-minute bus service through Metro, a future of rail. I have many friends, both for the Elderly and Disabled Transportation Commission, for example, as well as my friend Foster, who helped found Senior Shared Adventures, and Veronica Elsie, who's blind, who's also a senior, have really informed me that rail is very important to the senior community, to them personally, as well as good access on the buses so that they can get around when they're not able to drive. My friend Veronica can't drive because she's blind and her husband's had a lot of surgeries. And so a lot of people getting out of isolation really means providing access to them. For those who maybe don't feel comfortable and can't use public transit, then providing better services around Lift Line and paratransit, as well as those vibrant resources, the senior center and the resources so that they can come and have that interaction at the senior center. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, I think the most important place to start is with things that were working well before. And so I really think we need to get congregate meals back at the Live Oak Senior Center in a big way. I know there's a sort of limited amount of that program going on, but really being able to use the full facility for larger scale congregate meals is incredibly important. I mean, there's just nothing that compares to the time spent catching up over a meal, having that be something that you can do regularly, if not every day, then multiple times a week, and just the fellowship that builds. Then I would also look at expanding more sort of community events and volunteer opportunities, whether it's programs through our parks department, Tai Chi in the park, or I'm working on a program right now to expand plantings along East Cliff, so sort of gardening related opportunities that we could have engage older adults in helping with. I know that our libraries have had incredible programming for youth in terms of things like story time. Any way that we can then expand those same types of programming for older adults as well would be fantastic. And again, use these community centers, which are our libraries, which we've just done really a fantastic job reinvesting in, and look forward to seeing the Live Oak Library Annex here open shortly. And so let's take advantage of those and utilize them. And then finally, one thing that kind of relates to housing, which I didn't touch on before, is supporting more co-housing situations. So at Peace United Church, for example, they're building some units that actually have more like 7 bedrooms, and they have shared some number of a shared kitchen and a couple of bathrooms. But that actually brings the price down of building those units, and it also ensures that people are living in a greater with a greater sense of community and regular social connection.
Thank you. All right, well, we're about halfway through the questions. I really appreciate everyone. These are some pretty in-depth and interesting topics to talk about. So I'm going to get on to the next question here, which is about the master plan and aging. How will you support the county in the implementation of California's master plan on aging?
However needed, really. I mean, that of course that plan is still coming to fruition, but I think it touches on a lot of the things we've talked about: access to healthcare, addressing loneliness, ensuring stable housing, having a sort of vibrant community elements. I mean, ultimately, of course, there's really two levers that we have to pull as a county. One is, well, maybe three, housing and transportation, right? How we develop our infrastructure in a way that is supportive of all age groups, and then budget, how we invest what additional money we do have into local community programs. Certainly, as has been highlighted, we should really keep seniors top of mind, given that it's the fastest growing demographic within our community, as was mentioned at the beginning of this debate. And I think then ultimately to economize those limited resources, as I've said, we should look for programs that benefit both seniors and people of other ages. And I think that plenty of those types of programs already exist, and we could expand with more of them. I certainly think that we should fund programs like the Senior Ombudsman Program, make sure that comes back strong, foster grandparent, and then some of the other types of opportunities I've mentioned. I think working with our Parks Department and library staff to ensure that just those different programs are available to seniors.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So this is a program that I need to dig more deeply into. I understand that the master program has 5 major bold goals that they're looking at. The housing for all ages, which is really critical, again, focusing on how we can provide truly affordable housing for our community. If we just focus on building houses and don't focus on how we can create affordability, sectors of affordability that address this critical need of our seniors, we might find fallout that we don't address the needs properly. The other bold goal is the caregiving aspect, ensuring that we can provide good salaries and benefits for our caregivers so that we can continue to hire caregivers. That's going to be critical. Investing in the health of our seniors is really critical. Huge advocate around health and mental health illnesses, making sure that they do have access to these community meals and games, and that they can be integrated with all ages. A multi-generational connected community is sort of what I envision us working towards. Affording aging, and a lot of that I think is helping. Of course, we have our seniors who may be currently struggling in that, but also helping to prevent future seniors so that we can help better prepare them as they enter being seniors in those critical things that they might face. And inclusion and equity, providing those accesses at every level so that we can address those needs. And oftentimes just providing things like bars, for people to, that need help getting up, or ramps to get into their houses, engaging the community and being a part of that. Thank you very much.
Thanks. All right. Our next question here is, which programs serving older adults and people with disabilities have you been involved with, and tell us about how?
So primarily for me, I founded the organization Equity Transit. And one of the big reasons that organization came to light, the seed of that was, again, conversations that I was having with our older adults in the community. So equitable transportation, this access to equitable transportation is critical across all ages in making sure that you have access to education, access to jobs, access to healthcare, and for our older adults, access to getting away from being isolated, right? And, just having fun, right? So I have a lot of friends who are in their 70s and 80s who bike around, and I have a lot of people who are my volunteers on my campaign who are seniors. We have a really strong senior group of volunteers. And I think if we can help bring together our seniors who are really active and able, and help to inspire other seniors who may not have that level of activity, Similar to how with Cradle to Career, you have the community members who are Spanish speaking in the community serve as leaders from within to help activate the wider community of Spanish speaking and other parents in the community. So that's just one idea. You asked the question of what other programs have I been involved in. I haven't been involved in, for example, Meals on Wheels or some of these other programs directly, but I absolutely support them and support moving forward with more programs that will help greater connect us, like the foster grandparent program, diversity center program, which is critical for our LGBTQIA plus seniors that have their own set of challenges, senior outreach, Meals on Wheels, Liftline, the Stroke and Disability Center. There's so many good programs that we need to support. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah. So I've been directly involved with Gray Bears, volunteering with their healthy food program. So both packaging up the bags that go out, as well as volunteering when the folks can come and pick up food at the Gray Bears site. I think one of the great things about Gray Bears program is how they really engage a lot of volunteers who are seniors themselves and help people stay active and involved in the community. And then I've been directly involved with the Meals on Wheels program, again, delivering meals there. And I think one of the most striking things is seeing how, it's not just the food that is such a core piece of that program, but also the touch point, right? It's also the chance to check in with people, see how they're doing, talk about how their cat's doing, you name it, just to have that informal relationship. And that, of course, is so much, it's a very small piece of addressing loneliness and isolation, but it's critical. And then, of course, we've also helped to support the Meals on Wheels program, of course, throughout the core process, championing them and making sure we did set aside funds specifically for that program. But then also throughout this negotiation with the Live Oak School District and trying to help the school district recognize that ultimately the best solution is one that involves working together and supporting senior services rather than any kind of antagonism and telling them that they have to be out by the end of the month or the next month and thinking that this is somehow a zero-sum game. Also have been pretty involved with Cruz as a member of the Metro Board and have advocated for opportunities to build some housing above the Cruz facility or Metro site that we own in Live Oak near Dominican Hospital to just kind of expand the resources available there.
Okay. Well, speaking of transportation, my next question is, what are your ideas for making sure regional transportation is available, appropriate, and accessible for older adults and people with disabilities?
Yeah, so we're doing a ton on this right now as far as expansion of the Metro, as I mentioned already, and not just increasing frequencies to 3 routes across town, both on Capitola Road, SoCal Drive, and Portola, and that will, we're just talking about the senior center. This will literally bring a bus by the senior center every 15 minutes throughout the entire day and including on weekends. And then, of course, we want to make sure that the whole system is more accessible, and we are moving forward with building in-lane bus boarding islands so that you can have a level boarding of the bus so that it's easier for folks with disabilities or mobility challenges to actually get on the bus. We're going to be putting those all throughout the SoCal corridor. And then also in making the bus free starting the later part of this year, you'll be able to board both front and back. So that'll also reduce challenges there. We've also, while I've been on the Metro Board, experimented with trying to make the Cruz service easier. As we were coming out of COVID, we offered an app so that people could actually book ahead of time to use the Cruz service. Initially the thought was that we were going to expand the pool of riders overall, but what we saw is that actually it was existing folks who were using Cruz and now just could make an appointment last minute and really enjoyed that service. So I think that we could actually look at expanding that and continuing that going forward so that people can book Cruz same day. instead of having to call ahead. And finally, you know, on passenger rail, I have supported moving forward with the passenger rail environmental impact report. We're doing that study now to see if it's feasible and affordable for our community to build.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think this question, as well as many of the other questions that have been asked earlier, one of the things I would like to add to that is it's really critical to meet regularly with the senior council and other advocate organizations like Community Bridges. And so that's something that I would be committed to doing, sitting down and meeting regularly to really understanding the ins and outs of these complexities, because there's a lot of complexities, a lot of changes happening with the Master Plan for Aging, looking at the Older Californians Act, and all these things that are integrated and how we can better optimize those here locally. Specifically around transportation, we have key players like the Elderly and Disabled Transportation Commission and people that have been giving of their time. They're volunteers. They have seats at the table. They are activists in terms of the needs for our elderly and disabled needs. And not just having them have seats at the table, but actually listening to the advice and the things that they are providing to our supervisors, to our transportation commissioners, because I have heard from some of those folks that oftentimes there's that disconnect. You have these seats at the table, you have people who've expressed needs, and there's a disconnect. And so really honing in on and bridging that gap. Providing that 15-minute service with Reimagine Metro is really critical, as well as a future champion of, I will champion state rail, our rail, which will connect to that greater state rail network. So you can imagine you don't have a car, but you can still hop on the train and get to Monterey, Salinas, San Jose, and even San Francisco, all by rail without having to get into your car, which is really critical, and having those connectors through Metro, Cruz, and Liftline. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So what do you see as key elements in establishing Santa Cruz County as a more age-friendly community?
Well, I think that, again, getting people to collaborate and to work together and to really, I call it empathy, right? The more you have kids in the garden or cooking or playing cards or having meals with people across the ages and our older adults, the more we're starting to develop a whole generation of young people and middle-aged people that can connect well with our older adults. We've been in the past few decades, we've become a nuclear kind of society where you have people moving all over the country. And in a lot of ways, that's disconnected that natural multi-generational relationship. But what we're seeing now, because of the lack of affordability of housing in this community here, is that more people are starting to create multi-generational households naturally. But we can do more as leaders in the community to help bridge that gap, because not everyone has family here. Some people live here and have their kids in New York or, all over the country. And so how can we build those programs that naturally build that empathy and that connection? Building programs, prioritizing, and bringing people together as best as possible. And I apologize, I forgot the specific, if there's anything I didn't address in there.
No, just about the elements of establishing age-friendly community.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you can't just send out commercials all day long, but we can create marketing. Marketing is really critical. But building relationships, it all comes back down to how can we grow those connected community relationships. Thank you.
Thank you.
We've talked a fair amount about a number of the different elements that we have to consider, whether it's transportation or some of the programs that help connect people to our parks and libraries or at the senior center. But I think that ultimately the most important thing is really housing, because part of the reason we're seeing this huge shift in our aging greater shift towards older population, is because we don't have the housing in our community for young families to stay or to move here. And so if we don't address the housing issue, it's just going to become more and more critical. Because we're not going to have the doctors, the nurses, and really, I mean, even people to make sure that water and sewer services are delivered, or other public safety, I mean, firefighters to help people that, you know, first responders when people fall or have any kind of other health emergencies. So that's why my focus has been you know, so much on housing throughout my first term. I mean, one of the first things did was legalize tiny homes on wheels. Now, obviously, don't expect a senior to live in 400 square feet with a loft, but maybe their caregiver could, right? Also created pre-approved ADU plans so that someone who wants to build an ADU for multi-generational living or to bring in a roommate or caregiver could just pick a set of plans and go and build them with you know, just a site review rather than months of plan review. We eliminated permit fees for ADUs under 750 square feet. I also instituted a third-party plan check program to try to cut red tape in our planning department and allow people to bring their own permit plan checker. And then, of course, like I said, moving forward with the larger efforts for the sustainability update and the housing element that are going to allow more housing to be created in our community. And you know, going forward, I think I'm laser focused on making sure that our planning department it becomes even easier to use, that we reduce permit fees further, that we really incentivize the creation of affordable housing for seniors with you know, incentives for greater density or reduced permit process.
Thanks. All right, got another question here. This one's particularly salient to me as a director of a nonprofit and as a director of the Caregiver Resource Center here locally. The ability to provide livable wages within nonprofit agencies and for those providing personal care to older adults with disabilities is an increasingly critical challenge. What can we do?
Yeah, good question, John. And of course, you know, one of your earlier questions highlighted the fact that even though we had on some level, you know, kept funding at the county the same or even slightly higher for some programs, when you actually look at inflation, it hadn't kept up. And so, you know, ultimately, we need to make sure that the county is in a good financial position to be able to continue to fund these programs and to be able to fund the increases in inflation that we see as well. And that will allow you to, of course, turn around and fund your staff or pay your staff what they need to be able to live in this community. I think in order to do that, it really comes back to, okay, well, what's primarily driving revenues for this county? Property taxes is the main thing. And so I think, again, having a more pro-housing, building-friendly environment in this county is essential. And again, I've talked about how I plan to make some reforms there. I'm also looking at how at the state level, we can fix the allocation of property taxes that we get in this county. We only get 13.5%, where the statewide average is 20% for counties. And that difference really makes us a poor county, prevents us from investing in our infrastructure, whether it's our health centers or, you know, our social infrastructure, like our community groups and our nonprofits. And then, of course, ultimately, the primary thing that people are paying that is driving sort of increased cost of living here is housing costs. And I think the more that we can look at when we build housing, yeah, I mean, making sure that some amount of it is deed restricted, not just for you know, affordable units, but also for people who live and work in the area, whether it's in a certain square mile radius of the project, or who work for a local nonprofit or public entity.
Thank you very much.
So I think that the dramatic systemic issues that are impacting all levels at the, you know, within our county, so many programs, mental health programs. We're seeing our inability to provide wages that are keeping employees local. We don't have enough affordable housing. When you look underneath all of these issues, we have a really, truly systemic problem that goes all the way up to our federal level. And the reason why I talk about this, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, I call this the gaping wound that's bleeding us out in this country. And even though I have very minimal, but we do together have impact, is that we have to change the systemic gaping wound, because all we're doing here at the county level is slapping on Band-Aids onto this gaping wound to try to keep things from bleeding out so terribly bad. And so to deal with the systemic issue of the distribution of wealth, 45 years ago, the topmost corporations paid 80% of taxes. They gave back. They gave back to our communities. They gave back to our programs. They gave back to seniors. People could afford to live off of a wage as if you're a janitor, you could be proud of being the best janitor pushing a broom, and you can actually retire on a janitor's income. We no longer have that. If we don't start to work on that and switch that over, now corporations pay practically zero in taxes. We won't really be effective in addressing the underlying problem. Then, locally, I would say that we really do need to look at the affordable housing issue. We lack in state and federal subsidies, whereas one time we got a lot more subsidies, working on that piece. I'm endorsed by the SEIU 2015 because I support strong wages and benefits for long-term caregivers that will support our senior needs. And sorry, there's so much more here, but I know that my time is up, but I'd love to spend more time on this. Thank you.
Thank you. We're covering a lot of ground here today for sure. All right, another question here. Would you encourage the county to work with the Seniors Council, sponsor of this great event, and Central Coast Center for Independent Living to create a no wrong door system of service delivery in Santa Cruz?
Would you give me a little explanation of what you mean by no wrong door?
The idea here is that you set up a system that anywhere you call and reach out for services, they're going to connect you with those, not just say call this number, but really try to do their best to make a warm handoff, to make sure that you get in there and follow up. And that is a frustrating situation for folks sometimes when they call one place, they tell them to call somewhere else, et cetera, et cetera. So
I think absolutely.
Go ahead. Yeah. I'll be
I
quiet.
apologize, I interrupted. I think that that's a great way to start moving in that direction, similar to with our homelessness issue where we have navigation center and there's no wrong door to enter there. Wherever you go, you'll be put into that system, and then it's going to be very client centered. I think in similar move that we look at each person individually, and as they come in, no matter where they come in, that they can then get the services they need and directed in the right direction. I've heard so many times as people call, I've called so-and-so, and then they told me to call so-and-so, and then so-and-so actually directed me back to the same person I initially called. And, just optimizing. Those are the optimizations that we can start to look at as a community, working with the senior center, the different organizations that are advocates for these programs. Thank you.
Thanks.
And of course, we need a no wrong door approach to providing senior services. It's very similar to what we've been working on with providing mental health services right now, where actually folks will be able to access behavioral health care team through just calling 911. So let's not even, if possible, avoid creating a whole new method, and just make sure that however people are reaching out, they can find us. I'd really be interested to kind of learn more about the issue, in that of course there is a 211 service that United Way operates that I think to some extent tries to provide what you're talking about, and so if that's failing, maybe it's just people don't know that number. We should understand why, and kind of the ways that people are reaching out to make sure that we do provide it, and that there's full integration between sort of the network of services that are available through nonprofit organizations, as well as government programs available through the county.
Thank you very much. Come down to the last several questions here. What types of state legislation regarding older adults and people with disabilities will you support or oppose? Why?
What types specifically?
Correct. What types? So that leaves you some room to kind of give us your priorities.
Well, I mean, ultimately, I'll support legislation that will both expand services and support our aging, not only county, but state, and will oppose services that, either affects their older adults' quality of life, or impacts their ability to have, a comprehensive care community around them in any way. I think that while not specifically for older adults, a lot of the programs that the state has introduced on housing that make it easier, to both require our local area to produce more housing, and provide a number of options for creating that housing, including even building affordable housing on church property, that are all great and a good part of the solution. And certainly on the transportation stuff, a lot of the reason we're able to do so much with our Metro today and expand services because I went to lobby our state legislators to get that funding and help define a vision that serves people throughout our community. But yeah, those are the sort of the basics of, obviously we need to support our aging population.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I feel like I have certainly a lot to learn in terms of what legislation is actually in progress here. And I imagine you folks on the Senior Council could really help provide some good advice of what you feel is good and what you feel is not so good and how things can be prioritized. One of the first thing that comes to mind is CalCare because it affects the caregivers that give to our seniors. So if we can provide CalCare, which is, basically state available medical insurance to everyone in the state, then our caregivers aren't struggling to just live here and they can provide the care they need, that we need for our senior community. Infrastructure, of course, affordable housing is critical. And I actually really want us to think more in terms of cross-generational, cross-socioeconomic housing as opposed to isolated housing where you have just certain age groups or categories of people that are served, but that we look at more social housing structures that bring us all together. And I know some older adults prefer to kind of be in their, 55 plus, and that's great too. We can have that. But for those who really want that integration, that we can provide that, providing housing as a safety net, health, access to services, like we talked about nutrition services, any kind of legislation that's really going to help strengthen the things that will support our senior programs, I would be on board for. And again, circling back to being in council with our local senior advocacy groups to really find what are the best ways to move forward with that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And coming to the last question that I have prepared here, and then we'll be taking a couple questions from folks who are observing. So if you have a question that you haven't put into the Q&A, go ahead and do that. And then, then we'll wrap it up and we'll give you each a chance to kind of do a final statement. I won't forget that like I did your starting statement. So, all right, going back to the final question here. What is your vision for, well, not the final question, but the final one I had here, I'm sorry. What is your vision for long-term care in our county and our state?
Thank you. So, I think visionary thinking is the goal, like setting up what we want to do, ensuring that we're really investing in strengthening our programs for older adults. This is really critical. Again, I said earlier, all of us are going to get to that point where we're going to need these services. And so let's create them in a way that are foundational to our communities and that we can all look forward to these strong programs that are going to be there for all of us. To do that, a lot of the disconnect between the younger generations and the older generations is leading to what I spoke to earlier about creating those connections and those collaborations very early on so that people have that empathy and understanding as opposed to having the fear of, oh, there's the older people over there and then there's the younger people over there, but we're really all a part of the same community and watching out for each other. The vision also really having this equitable transportation system is critical. it serves our young people, it serves our older people. I imagine, like in much of Europe and in old America, that people are on public transportation, and that's where people talk. It's an opportunity for people to get to know each other. And so if we have robust public transportation, you'll naturally find young people and older people together on these systems. Providing the safety nets for people at risk for housing, I really see that. Growing our programming around housing and affordability of housing is really critical, putting the focus on that. Financial guidance for people who are seniors as well as adults looking at starting to enter into that, so that we're really more prophylactically, more preparing how we can address these needs as we move into the future. And I think I'll end it there. Thank you.
Very good.
Yeah, so my vision for more multi-generational and supportive community, I think, involves ultimately building more sustainable communities. I think that we can solve a lot of these problems just in the way that we through our built environment. As we build more sustainable housing, as both a requirement to build local housing and address the climate crisis, we can also make sure that those communities are designed in a way with more public gathering spaces. Whether that is a public square with a coffee shop or co-working space or a micro library, just places for people to informally meet. Also having care centers for child care centers on site and built into some of these communities, so that we can expand interactions between people of all ages, so that seniors help take care of the next generation, build those relationships, as well as take care of animals and plants together. I mean, ultimately, I think when you look at the blue zones across the world, really what stands out is that people have a chance to that live long lives and live to 100. They're gardening, they're walking up and down stairs, in nature as well. But the steeper the hillside, the better. And they also have a very tight-knit social network that they feel connected with people, of whether it's their family or another group of seniors that ultimately looks out for each other and provides even some kinds of insurance. So I think that ultimately, we're not going to be able to scale and address this issue just by funding more and more social programs. I mean, of course, we need those programs, but ultimately, we've got to have it so that the actual very fabric of our community is supportive of a healthy lifestyle, rather than having to constantly pay more to make those programs out of thin air.
Thank you. All right, I do have a question here from an attendee. Got a couple here, so I'll summarize this one real quick. So when you speak of adding assisted living and other long-term care services and support, it's important to note that those who have money can afford to pay for these facilities. But let's face it, the greatest number of older adults are on fixed incomes. So how would you create the expansions in long-term services and facilities and options for the low-income folk?
Sure, I can take that question first. Well, it actually works hand in hand. The more people that can pay full price, the more people can enjoy a subsidized price effectively. I mean, and I've talked to great length with some of the folks in our medical community, particularly Larry DiCataldi, former CEO of PAMF here in Santa Cruz. And as I said, basically half our community is on some kind of government insurance, whether it's Medicare or Medi-Cal, and our healthcare providers lose money on those programs. I mean, significant. I mean, to the tune of millions of dollars every year. And so, while I agree that just building senior care facilities is not the solution for a lot of people who are on fixed incomes, at the same time, the more people that can live here of all generations and pay through their employer or basically full price for medical care, then that ultimately ensures that our medical care providers are in a better financial position to then help people of all incomes and abilities. I think that's really going to be the challenge even for places like Watsonville Hospital, right? Yeah, this bond measure will certainly help put them in the black, but long term, and that's why they're looking at providing really more specialist care so that they can attract more people from a wider area to their hospital for those specialty services that pay a lot, so that then they can keep providing things like maternity services for other people.
Thanks.
I think there's a real struggle that we have in terms of, again, looking to the systemic problem and how we prioritize our funds nationally and statewide. So I really would say that I would advocate with our state legislators to fight for more subsidies and to prioritize getting money for these programs. And again, having the corporations and folks that are at those high income, that these corporations are making huge amounts of money, that the CEOs that are not paying taxes, to get them to pay their fair share back into the system. And part of that is setting up seniors beforehand as their workers so that those are paying into systems that will then benefit in the future. So one of the things that happened when my mom was going through cancer and rehab was that they basically said, look, to further cover you past this time frame, you're going to have to sell your home to go into Medi-Cal. You can only have so much income. And it was really a horrible situation that puts a lot of people who are struggling and dealing with medical issues to where they have to sell everything, and they don't even have any equity then if they can get back on their feet to go back into their homes. And we just need to look at those systems and how we can change those. And social housing, affordable housing are also key as well. But with assisted living, paying good wages, and I apologize, I kind of lost the thread of that conversation, but I think it gets back to assisted living and how we can support that. We do need more subsidies. We need more support for that going forward.
Cool, thank you. I have another question from the attendees here. So I'll just read it straight out. Now that the Live Oak School is facing takeover by the state and laying off teachers, but refusing to take Community Bridges' offer to buy the senior center property and bail the schools out, what would you do to help save both groups?
I think this is going to be really nuanced conversations. I've spoke to folks on both sides, and I feel like there's a lot of nuance in terms of what both sides want to do. And I think it's important to bridge those conversations so that we can help work to feel like everyone is working towards goals that will support both the needs of one group and the other. And there's a lot of nuances that sometimes can get lost in those conversations. And so helping to bring forward those nuances and how we can be strategic, as well as, so for example, if there are state limitations on what can and cannot do through the sale, or the money that's generated from the sale, or the processes that are happening, that we can be on team together to address the state and say, state of California and your rules, how can we work to have a solution that benefits both of these groups? The senior center has, and the senior council has long supported the school system and partnered for many years to make it very successful for both. And so we really kind of have to work together to get on that page that we're working together towards solution, as opposed to opposing each other in taking sides. Because I do hear that everyone on each side, there seems to be a desire to come forward to solution. How to do that, there's a lot of nuance. And so I won't address those nuances because they're very complex. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot. And looks like we do not have any additional audience questions.
If I could, do you want me to respond to the last question?
I'm sorry, I jumped the gun there. Your turn.
Worries. All right, thanks, John. Yeah, well, as far as when it comes to solving the budget crisis for Live Oak School District and then resolving some of the senior centers needs, I mean, I do think that all options should be on the table when it comes to the school district trying to fix this very urgent budget crisis. And I mean, I think it was very generous of Community Bridges to make that offer to purchase the site. And it should absolutely be considered as, I mean, I would be disappointed if at the next board meeting of the school district, they didn't at least address their consideration of that offer and why or why not they were going to move forward with it. You know, the county did play a really key role in a very similar project when Dientes and Santa Cruz Community Health moved in and we built the affordable housing there just down the street at 1500 Capitola Road. It's a very similar situation, kind of a mid-block parcel, not as attractive for commercial development. And we helped to bring the different nonprofit partners together to ultimately make that project happen. And so I've always believed that we could play a similar role with this property if it was a collaborative approach that was necessary or desired by all folks involved. I mean, and I think I would also try to help the school district understand that we can still build teacher housing without it necessarily all being on one site. I mean, in fact, that might actually be preferable for the teachers themselves, you know, who spend all day with their fellow community of teachers and with students and might not want to be packed into some more studios all on one site. So I think that we can look at opportunities to incentivize the creation of teacher housing throughout the community, distributed in lots of new housing projects. Through these kinds of incentives around ministerial permitting process or reduced permit fees. So I, you know, if the school district sells this site, it's absolutely not the end of the conversation on teacher housing.
All right, outstanding. So now we have come to the end of the questions, and we'll give you each an opportunity to kind of have your final statement. And I just want to say that you know, I've been very impressed with the great conversation, high level, thoughtful, you know, comments that everyone's made, and I really appreciate you both taking the time to be here and talk to these issues. So, all right, take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a pleasure to have this opportunity to focus more on the issues facing older adults in our community. I think, you know, as you've heard, I have been very involved in some of the core issues affecting older adults in our community, whether it is working to address issues at the Live Oak Senior Center or working with the many older adults that live in mobile home parks through, especially here in Live Oak, but ultimately throughout the county, and ensuring that there's safe and equitable transit opportunities to get around our community. I think that what I can offer is the experience that of having gone through all these issues, really knowing the issues, including the core process and how we can improve that going forward, and ultimately being able to help guide a relatively new board of supervisors come 2025 when those core decisions are going to be made. To make sure that we come to the right outcome. You know, one of the disadvantages I felt that I faced in this last process is some of the more senior supervisors were like, well, this is the process that we put together. We've been engineering it over many years and we just have to stick through the process. And, you know, as I said, I think that it ultimately could have been better. And I look forward to coming to it with that experience, the much work that I've done with the senior community over the last few years, and ultimately being sure that we invest in the programs that are going to get the federal matching dollars that are going to ultimately benefit all generations, and that ensures that we have a consistent, safe social safety net going forward. Thank you. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to join you today. My core values really are centered around growing solutions together with you through ground-up collaborative partnerships. And you don't have to train me to understand the importance of ensuring that we provide increasing support for our older adults. I grew up in two multi-generational families, my mother's Hawaiian family and my father's Swiss family, where as a young child, the older adults were an integral part of my life. So at 5 years old, my aunties were teaching me to cook and garden and play canasta. And in the evenings, the elders would gather to play cards or mahjong and tell stories while us younger folks would play around the table. I want to help to foster a stronger connection to and understanding of our older adults by the wider community, by connecting our younger community members with our older adults, which can help mitigate that disconnect across generations. My friend Yoli Provost at 81 years old brings the young mamas together along with their children in the garden. They deal with the challenges of parenthood together through music and activities. And these gatherings span 3 generations, ensuring all ages support each other. I'm the kind of leader that works to connect people together because I believe we're stronger when we better understand each other. And as a state delegate, I've developed relationships with our legislators that we have more power to bring in more money to grow our senior programs and support the continuation and growth of the senior center and programs like Meals on Wheels, as well as champion public transit, including rail, so that seniors can retain their freedom and remain active in the community if their ability to drive diminishes. Our seniors deserve and need more support and attention from our leadership. I'm endorsed by former Supervisor John Leopold, Congressman Farr, Senator Bill Monning, and Assemblymember Mark Stone, all of them who are seniors. And I will bring respectful leadership to the role of supervisor, collaborating with our seniors and state leaders alike, and organizing with groups such as yourself, so important to our community, senior council. And I do hope to have the honor of your vote. Thank you for the time.
Thank you to the candidates. Thank you to all the participants who attended. And on behalf of myself and the Seniors Council, it's been a great opportunity to talk about these issues, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day ahead of them. Take care.